All right. Thank you all for joining. Obviously, there's a fun session going on next door. I can hear it, but we'll power through this. My name is Jeff Medford, and I'm a technical product manager with the Office 365 team. And we did a deployment pre-day yesterday, and I think I see several folks who were in that. But raise of hands, did you come to the deployment pre-day? Couple? All right. Okay. So we will have a little bit of some of that conversation, but we'll try to push through to some new things. And so I'm on the Office Deployment Adoption and Readiness team, work with Alistair, who did the introduction to Office 365 earlier. We're going to go a little bit deeper into the deployment side, as it states, deploying Office 365. What does it mean to deploy? What are some of the scenarios we look at? What are some of the best practices and also some of the things that we've learned over the last 6-7 years as Microsoft from a deployment perspective? And that's really what my team does and our focus. So any questions, anything else that you have, please raise your hand. One of the things I wanted to mention is this is obviously a very Office 365 focused session. There are tons of Project Online and Project Online sessions that obviously include 365. I put up a name, Jan's name, and I said, hey, in the project, My PC, place you go, there's 26 online tagged sessions. So I'm an expert on Office 365. My experience with Project kind of goes along with that keynote this morning where my marketing teams would be in budget meetings and my budget would always get cut because it didn't match the strategic scenarios. We actually went through Project Server to do all those. So my experience with Project is always on the end result of having to manipulate my budget every single year through a Project Server. So there's plenty of people, though, on the Office 365 team who are really the project experts, and you can talk to them in depth about Project Online. The question that I hope I answer over the next few minutes and next hour is really, what does deployment mean when it's a cloud service? And this is one of those things that it's really a shift from a mind perspective, what we're doing as an organization, how we interact with our customers in more of a direct manner. And so a couple of the points I wanted to hit as we go through is Microsoft's investments in deployment, the ease of pilot or trying to drive really business scenarios. Because the service is live and because it's so easy to consume, we can start to focus instead of on the technical aspects, but a lot more around the business aspects of what the service can actually deliver. Identity management is always a huge concern. No matter if you're doing simply Project Online, Project Pro, Office Pro Plus, anything that you're going to download and consume from the service, you have to have a management of identity strategy in place because you're logging in and activating. You're using a license. You're being able to roam across PCs. And with that comes identity. Who are you? What are you licensed for? How many of licenses does your organization have? That's a big conversation from a deployment perspective. Also, migration of data. We're going to talk about a few kind of simple paths, more of the Exchange workload and what Exchange looks like when you're typically moving data, as that's a big part of a deployment scenario. And then we'll talk a little bit about change management, as you now moving into the cloud are going to receive updates and service capabilities on, then deployment becomes more of a service management and a change management issue within your environment. So these are some of the things we're going to get into. I'm going to go in through a couple of demonstrations to kind of show what this actually looks like from the service perspective. But any questions, you can stop me as we go. There's a small crowd, so questions and guide me as we go. So to start with Microsoft's investment, and you heard Jared this morning say $3 billion investment, and if it was 5 years ago, he said it was $1 billion investment, and 3 years ago, it was a $2.1 billion investment, and he was talking about right now it's a $3 billion investment from an infrastructure, Office 365 data center perspective. So when we talk about cloud scale, I at first wanted to say, hey, all these investments we're making is not just around a single product. It's not just around a single capability. And this sets the stage. This slide, hopefully, will help you understand. He had a very simplistic slide, Jared did, that I actually really liked, that said you have services, very easy to understand. When we used to work with servers, you might have a project server in the office, or an Exchange server, or a data center. When you think of those services, it starts there. Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Lync Online, Yammer, Project Online, obviously. Those are the servers that have moved to the cloud. And when you think about Office 365 as these workloads, these engineering teams working together to then push their software into a service, this is really where it starts. And then you get into the applications, and this is where the confusion really hits with a lot of our customers and end users. And this is where they talked about in the keynote that you get into the Office 365 Pro Plus, the Project Pro, Visio Pro, and these are applications that you download and run locally, and they're 100% full fidelity applications, yet you're consuming them from the cloud because you're licensed via the cloud. You're licensed via our activation systems. And this really starts to go across all devices. So when you think about what the productivity applications can be, this is where a lot of confusion comes in. Is it on an iPad? Is it on an iPhone? Is it on an Android? Is it on a Windows machine or a Mac? And the answer is yes, across the board. And we deliver these applications in the various native forms that they need to be delivered. So Office 365 is a set of servers and services, and then applications in which you consume no matter where you are, no matter what device you're using. And what that really then comes down to is these can't just be point solutions. And this is where, again, they talked about the full power of the platform of Office 365 and really that they brought Project Online and brought Project into this platform, because it isn't just a bunch of disparate products. It is a full comprehensive service. And that starts with an entirely new consolidated experience. And in the demos you probably have seen today and what Alistair showed, there is a single consolidated experience across all these services for you. And that really becomes the core of what Office 365 delivers. So whether you're administrating or purchasing licenses or working with identity, it goes across everything that you're purchasing as a subscription. Whether your landing pages look like Project, look like SharePoint, they're all part of the same infrastructure, the same top nav bar, and from a look and feel and from an end user perspective, this is a huge critical point. So every team that works against all of these servers and all of these client applications, they have to be able to deliver as a user experience within Office 365. And even beyond that, and when you think about Office 365 as a platform for all Microsoft products and productivity to flow into, that's when you have commerce and billing integrations. You have identity and platform authentication, what we'll talk about, network infrastructure and service management. So Office 365 is all of these things put together. And it's all of these teams and engineering groups and marketing teams and One Microsoft and whether it's Project, Visio, or the core Office components, Office 365 is this entire infrastructure. And so when we think of deployment, you can pick and choose. You can use Exchange. You can use Project Online. You can start one now, do one later, but it's all going to fit into this entire family of services and investments that Microsoft's making. When you think about it, and I'll just go quickly through this slide, but $3 billion looks a little bit like this. Now, we won't say how many we actually have. We'll say between 10 and 100, which is a pretty amazing big, it could be 99 or it could be 11. So we don't tell how much we have from a data center perspective, but $3 billion is going into this infrastructure from the Microsoft side to build and run a service that we can provide SLAs to you as the customer. And so not only do you have data centers that are redundant in geo-redundant locations, you also then start to move to these CDNs, which basically is trying to bring the Microsoft network as close as possible to you so that when you're using SharePoint Online or when you are using Project Online, you have the best possible experience. because wherever you are in the world or in the countries, we want you to be on the Microsoft network as quickly as possible so that we can then control all of the bandwidth, the ability to have great refresh rates and times between your client and what we do from the servers. And then we have access points, fiber optic network. Alistair said it perfectly. We have the third largest fiber optic network in the world, and that's just Microsoft dealing with our own infrastructure. So when I think of deployment and what is deployment, Microsoft is doing this on your behalf. And I'll just push through this a little quicker. So deployment on Microsoft's perspective looks like data centers. It looks like racks. It looks like people in locations near hydroelectric dams building out billions of dollars worth of hardware and software to truly be able to deliver on our SLAs. So we deploy this. We keep the power running. We keep all the lights on. You know, sometimes I talk to very large customers, and sometimes I talk to very small, and I always ask them the question, can you do this? Can you do this better than we can? If you can, we would love to know your best practice, because we feel like we are the best at running our services than anyone else out there. The engineering teams own their service. The people who write the code get woken up at night, answer the call, and then keep the service up and running. So we truly think of deployment in a very different way as modular, hardware, just huge brute force amount of processing power. And this is Microsoft's deployment of Exchange. This is our deployment of Project Online. And this is where we are moving from a future perspective and all those investments that go into it. So as you go through, you know, Alistair is probably the best one at talking about this, but I'll do my best. When you think of an Exchange farm, and when you think of what our customers have to do to be highly reliable within their own environments, you need data centers, you need storage, you need arrays of disks, you need to be able to perform at a very high level. This is what we do with Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, and Project Online. So when you heard, you know, Jared, and you heard all the keynote of why Project Online moved into Office 365 as a platform, it's because we build to this capability. And if you look here at the way we do Exchange, I mean, you're talking thousands and thousands of users, hundreds of millions of users, thousands of users on a single piece of hardware. That hardware is just burned through, put back. We don't ever patch because it takes too long to patch. We don't need to worry about that in a deployment scenario. We simply continue to build and build and build so that it's as redundant as possible. So deployment to Microsoft looks like this. It looks like SharePoint. When you think of all the different components of SharePoint within a data center, within your own SharePoint farms, if you are part of that group, you have Active Directory, you have all the different SQL servers, you have web front ends, you have back ends, and you have all of these that have to be a SharePoint farm. And if you think of your IT architects or the people working in your IT rooms, building SharePoint, having their own SharePoint issues, they have to do this. And from a Microsoft perspective, we build the same farms. We build the same farms and we call them a stamp. And 250,000 users go on this. And then we continue to build that stamp out within the network. And we have redundant stamps within the same data center. And then as you look at how we build through from a network perspective, you then just start replicating those stamps out. You start building more infrastructure. And these are all virtualized, and it just keeps running. And if one of these goes down, the rest of them take up the load. And then as we go, thank you very much. Not only do we have that in the data center, we have it in another data center. We're doing log shipping, we're doing backups, we're doing file backups, we're doing all the work that it takes. And not only have we built SharePoint farms, the largest SharePoint farms in the world, but the critical point is building all the extra stuff to be able to run that successfully. So what does deployment look like? It looks like this. And this is what the infrastructure is. Go ahead. Yeah, so basically, if you're patching servers and you have hundreds of thousands of servers, you could never patch them fast enough or you could never patch them in a big enough scale to literally get through them. So our servers go on a 2-week run, and then we just build them from the baseline image of the new patch as we go. So a server is just an appliance, takes load, we take the load off of it, we totally wipe it, bring it right back into production. Yeah, so I'm not the SQL expert, but the SQL side and how we deal with that from basically live migration and virtual machines and everything we do from SQL stays the same. Yeah. So what does it look? So that's how it looks like to Microsoft. When we deploy Exchange Online or SharePoint Online or Project Online, it's in the scale of hundreds of millions of users. So what does it start to look like from a customer perspective? You don't have to do all of that. The hardest part becomes connecting to that, because the service is there, it's running, you can sign up anytime, any day, have all those capabilities ready for you. So what we've had to do is really rethink how we talk to our customers about deployment. And one of the things that we talk about around deployment is fast track. And it's really trying to go from the typical legacy infrastructure build of talking to our customers about infrastructure, what you need from specs, how you need to order hardware, what is it your configuration needs to be. It moves from those discussions into how do you start using the service quickly? What is it that you need to do to start consuming Office 365? And so what we've come up with from a fast track perspective and from a naming is just trying to be that name and say, hey, Office 365 deployment is deploying, but it really needs to be quick. It's already there, and you want to start from a small perspective of a pilot, and you can always move forward into production. So fast track as a methodology, and it's really the Microsoft sales and deployment methodology, is that you start from a pilot, or you start small, or you start consuming the service immediately, and you can always run it straight through to production. So you don't throw away work. You don't have big, large proof of concepts that get used for a certain period of time and then thrown away. The service is there, it's running, it's waiting for you. So deployment looks very different from the end user side. Office 365 is the full service. E3 is the SKU. You can always trial the SKU. Project Pro has a trial. So you always have the ability to trial and use the service very quickly. And that is one of the points, and we were just talking with a gentleman up front, we need to make sure from a Microsoft side that it's not just one piece you're looking at. It's not just a link, or it's not just an Exchange mailbox, but it's how can your business change if you're utilizing Lync with Exchange? Because we've built all the integrations you need between these services. So as you move through, it's always about time to value. We want you to get value from the service as quickly as possible. So all of our documentation, our deployment scenarios drive towards that time to value. And then again, I've kind of gone over and over it here, but identity options are huge. We've given you the option to start immediately with 0 on-premises integration with a Cloud ID. You can then move into a little more complex scenario when you move into deployment and start utilizing your own IDs, directory synchronization with Active Directory, and I'm going to show a little bit about that in the demo. So from a methodology perspective, we've done a ton of the hard work. We've built out all of the services you need, and really it's starting to consume them quickly that is on our customers. It's on our partners to deliver. It's on our services teams to really help our customers through. And it starts with a very simple 3-step process: pilot, deploy, enhance. We want our customers to try it, pilot it, then deploy, core onboarding, and then if you have deeper level scenarios, complex integration points, there's no reason why those can't come after you've core onboarded. So from a sales and deployment methodology, Fast Track is the way of looking at Office 365 deployment as try it, deploy it when you're ready for core onboarding, and then move to those more advanced scenarios. We had a lot of customers taking the typical path of legacy and trying to, remediate their entire Active Directory, implement single sign-on across multiple forests, And they were doing that before they ever experienced Office 365. And so we had to really help our customers pivot and say, start with the pilot, move to core deployment, and then start to extend and enhance. And what does that really look like? This is what I call our scope of work to our customers. During your pilot, you can expect to have the full service. You can expect that it only takes hours. It deploys, it persists to deployment, and it's really kind of user-led migration. And I'll show you what that looks like when we go through this, because user-led to IT-led is where the work really starts to happen. When we think about the pilot side, this really is your first experience. This is how we deliver the service at any time. You can always sign up and you can always try it, but we really want to make sure that you're focusing on those more business end-user perspectives as you move into the more technical side of deployment, which is core onboarding, deploy in days, and it really starts to drive the company-wide cloud use. And from a scope of work perspective, you'll get a shared namespace, simple coexistence, and external sites. So really trying to lay out in front of our customers the step-by-step process of getting online. And all of this is available on fasttrack.office.com. This is our public-facing guidance. You can see it's pretty to the point. Pilot, deploy, enhance. Every single step. Consider this the deployment document that you need to move from where you are today with nothing, or maybe you're not ever tried Office 365, all the way into a production scenario within your organization. So we try to be very explicit. We've come from a long line of document writers who love to have 200-page documents, but we are really trying to focus it down to the things that you need to deliver to the business so that you can work through these scenarios. So I'm going to show a few of those as we go, but I just want to hit on some of the identity side, as this is a pretty critical piece of what a cloud solution delivers. Any questions so far? All right, good. Everyone's got it? Everyone's ready? All right, so cloud identity, what does that actually mean, and why is it important? The entire time of a pilot means you should be able to utilize SharePoint, Project Online. You should be able to utilize SkyDrive Pro, which is now OneDrive for Business. You should be able to actually consume mail using connected accounts without ever touching your on-premises architecture. And that's where cloud identities come into play. So when you think about you or Bob logging into Office 365, it's pretty simple. You can create users directly from the admin portal, or you can do it from a CSV import. Say you have a pilot of 25 to 200 users. It's really easy to create that import, and then you get them going right away into the service. Whatever authentication has to happen around the Windows Azure directory, these people get moved into there. You still haven't touched the AD. You haven't touched their current profiles. You'll manage them outside of your current infrastructure, but those users will have everything they need to log into Windows Azure AD and gain access to all of the services available with Office 365. So whether it's project, whether it's activation for Office, mailbox access, admin portal, that user simply logs in directly to the service, and because you uploaded them or created them manually, they're there and ready to go. And that's really the way to start. It's a very easy way to start. They have a .onmicrosoft.com login, and you can move directly from that into the future of production. So what does that look like from an identity perspective? Here we are with directory sync with password sync. So assuming you've kind of worked through a pilot scenario, you've started with some end users, they really are enjoying what they're doing, kind of these new ways to work, going through some business scenarios. You then have the ability to work with your Active Directory. And your Active Directory can push users. You can scope it down. You can do all users. You push those users to the cloud so that the end user who's using Office 365 has a full global address list, can email and have all of their emails be SMTP proxied between the cloud and on-premises so that they have a full rich experience. And that starts with directory and password sync. Same scenario, Bob's trying to log into Office 365. You have an Active Directory on your premises. That Active Directory uses a tool, and it's a very simple, and I'll show you what it looks like, tool off of your domain controller and synchronizes users to that same exact Windows Azure cloud. So your directory is synchronizing users, the global address list, and everything into its own place, its own secure area, so that it's only for your organization. So someone who is trying to log in to any of the services on Office 365 will actually be able to log in with their username, their password from their Windows machine, and have the ability to log into Office 365. This is a very single sign-on type of experience where the user knows their password from their network, they know how they logged into Windows, and now that password is part of Office 365. They simply log in with their username, password, done. And if you're using applications like Outlook or Lync or Word or anything else that's the rich applications, those just simply cache those logins and let you log in every time you open. Yep. 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 You can. We do a soft match. So if we see those users online from your Active Directory, we will soft match them in. So there's no deletion or disruption or whatever. You literally soft match, and those users now become in the cloud, and they become synchronized. Yep. Yep. Correct. So you literally can go right from here to the AD option, and we will soft match any users that are in Office 365 with anyone in your Active Directory, and they'll then start being consumed by that dir sync with password sync. Another question? Yep. You can have a mix of cloud created and Active Directory created. So if you want, but then you also could get into a scenario of what is it that you want them to log into? Is it documents? Is it sharing documents? You can do that directly from SharePoint without having to manage them as licensed users. So if you have 20 people in your org and you are working together in licensed and Office 365 users, and you have 100 partners outside of your org who you don't want to license, you can use external sharing, and they can come in through SharePoint and be able to work with you. You can do federation of link so that you see them directly through your link, and you don't have to license those users whatsoever. Don't quote me, but I think it's literally 10,000 what we call PALs, P-A-L, Partner Access License, that you can have outside of your organization. Yep. And so then the next step that I wanted to talk about is if Active Directory Federation Services, if you know what that word is, if you know what it means, you can step to that next. And this is a totally optional. And what we've seen in the past was we did not have directory sync with password sync. It didn't exist until last May, and we've been selling this service for 6 years now. So we had customers that had very specific needs around single sign-on, and the only way they could do it was what I'm going to show you now. We still have customers that have specific scenarios where they absolutely need this, but what we've seen is a huge amount of adoption around dir sync with password sync for a couple of reasons, and I'll point them out as we go through here. Active Directory, and I know I'm going a little deep on this stuff, but the identity is such a critical piece. Active Directory, with Active Directory Federation Services, it creates a trust with your on-premises Active Directory, and in that trust, it then allows the Active Directory Federation Services to know who you are compared to the cloud. So you have the Active Directory that's in the cloud. You have a trust that's going back down through a reverse proxy, through your edge side of ADFS, into your Active Directory, and it's not taking passwords or it's not taking the users, it's taking certificates and tokens. But what it does is basically every time that user tries to log into the service, and I just got to check my build here. Every time the user tries to log into the service, it actually goes back through, requests a certificate. Your Active Directory has to say, yes, this is the right person because we're federated, and then you're allowed to log in. So picture going to SharePoint. It's the cloud. You can get to it from anywhere. You're on a plane, you're on anywhere with Wi-Fi. You try to log into SharePoint. It then goes all the way back to your Active Directory, checks who you are, and then lets you into SharePoint. Anyone for a bonus on why you may not want to do that? Alistair, my plant.
You're adding a single point of failure.
Yeah, absolutely. You're adding a single point of failure that becomes you. And you have a cloud service that should be accessible anywhere, and you're now the single choke point. Because if your Active Directory is down, if your internet connection from where the 80 is down, if you're not able to receive those requests from the cloud is still up. Everything's good to go. But our customer assumes they're down for Office 365 because when those users try to log in, it cannot get the security token. It will not let them pass. To give you a good example, we had a big storm in New York. Several of our customers in New York a couple years ago had ADFS. They did not have it disaster recovery. They had it in the basement of a building that got flooded out. We got many, many calls to our support that said Office 365 is down. And unfortunately, we had to respond and say, no, we're 100% up. Your own infrastructure took you down. So that's, obviously there are business values to this. You can do client access control. You can do some other really in-depth things around multi-factor authentication. But it's definitely on the furthest reach of the spectrum. Cloud ID is on one side, and ADFS is all the way to the other end. And we feel like that there is a natural progression happening where Cloud ID moves to directory sync with password sync, and that's where a lot of our customers get a ton of value. So thanks for bearing with me with the identity side, but it's a critical piece because even if you are utilizing Office Pro Plus or Project Pro, you still need to handle the identity properly. Go ahead. Yes. So, yes, it is. And when you think about what's actually necessary, you know, when on our white papers for ADFS, I think our minimum requirement is 6 servers. Minimum requirement. So it's a tough discussion when you're talking about going to the cloud and you're building at least 6 server infrastructure with DMZ proxies and everything else. It's a tough. In 2 locations, by the way, or you have kind of put the risk on your back. Yep. So I just wanted to give an example from an Exchange perspective. Anyone here who's IT or Exchange related? Couple. All right. So good. A couple people. Hopefully, we'll see what this is all about. A lot of our customers are moving mail. They are moving mail into the cloud at record numbers. We are seeing massive growth with Exchange Online. And so I just wanted to give a bit of a path that says, what does it actually look like when you do a pilot, and what are some of the decision points? And I thought, well, I can put it into a little bit of Visio or kind of decision trees to kind of fit the mood of the conference. But we have, in a pilot, if you're running Exchange 2003 or 7, really the decision points you'd have as you move through your pilot is start with that Cloud ID. Are you going to migrate the actual mailboxes for users during a pilot? Let them do self-service. Maybe it's PST. Maybe it's connected accounts. We have different ways of consuming online mail from your on-premises environment. Or is it going to be admin-driven, where you're actually doing the PST imports or using IMAP migrations during your pilot? Or again, from the self-service with connected accounts and PSTs. What this means is, if you have Exchange 2003 or 2007, there is not a very, I'll just be really honest, there is not a hybrid story with older technology. 2010 SP3 and 2013, those are cloud aware. Exchange was built for the cloud starting in those years. So if you have an Exchange 2010 SP3, you can connect to the cloud very easily in a hybrid approach, and you actually can move mailboxes directly through your Exchange Management Console. If you are on older technology, which you know a lot of our customers are, there's only a couple of ways to do it. So in Pilot, if you want the mail to be an experience, you can use connected accounts so that you can email in and out with your own domain without having to verify a vanity domain. Or you can import PSTs and have mail routing to actually handle that. When you go from a pilot, which basically stops here from a mail perspective, and move to deploy, you then have a couple other different ways to go about it. You start with a shared namespace, which is yourcompany.com, getting that verified in the cloud, which is really easy to do with a text or CNAME record, but it's always a kind of barrier for our customers to get through that. You start with a shared namespace, and that's why we're in deploy. Hopefully your business unit, your business users have said, yeah, this is what we want to do. We're moving forward. Office 365 is the future for us. Let's go forward. That is when you step into these deploy steps, because they do take time and energy and technical skills. Shared namespace into migration. You still have the option of self-service PSTs, but admin-driven becomes PST or IMAP migration right after you've done the shared namespace. You still need zero on-premise architecture to do any of this deployment. So you literally are drawing that mail up. You're on-prem. You can move the mail and then start to decommission mailboxes once you've done that. If you wanted to enhance, you could go into the synchronize with password sync. You could do a staged migration. Staged migration is a built-in utility from an Exchange Online perspective, and it will allow you to basically pick your users. They start moving from Exchange. Mail data moves into the cloud, flips their target proxy so that all of their mail comes to the cloud now, even though you have some users who are on-prem. Go ahead. It's literally through IMAP. So when our tool says, what's your IMAP ports, where do we need to go, who are the users, and it actually logs in as the admin that has access to those users, sucks it out using IMAP. Correct. Yep. So IMAP is actually utilizing the protocol to do it, and it does it with your credentials. It depends if you have a real PST problem. We have customers who have PSTs just destroying their infrastructure, and we see them use the import tool because it'll actually connect to AD, find PSTs, draw them in. But we have customers also who maybe they have just old infrastructure. All they can implement is IMAP, and so that's the way they use. But what we do see a lot of is once we get to this deployment and it's really like, hey, we are moving to the cloud. If you have 2003 or 7, doing staged migrations is what we see a ton of, because that is more control. You can do it in batches. You can choose who moves. And really the only downside is that when you've moved someone in a staged migration, they can now see all the FreeBSD and everything else of people online, but they can't see the on-prem. So they become a bit of an island. And you just have to manage through that as you're deploying. So I'll just keep going here. So some of the things with the decision points that I wanted to show. It's always identity, namespace, the approach you're going to use with coexistence, and then authentication. And those really are the decision points. And it doesn't take a ton of time to do the deployment. It's the data migration that starts to hit the clock when you're just simply moving mail. So I want to talk a little bit about Office Pro Plus, as when we think about deploying Office. You have a question in the back? Yep. We have several partner tools that support that well, and I think we have some utilities that can help position those online. And now with 2013 released, and when we moved from a cloud position to 2013, we actually support public folders in the cloud. So there is a very specific white paper. This is how you move through these. And generally we see partner tools used from a public folder perspective. Correct. Yep. It would be. And then I would beg you to please use SharePoint Online or other features instead of public folders. Absolutely. And that's why we made Site Mailbox look like a public folder. And that there's always going to be that conversation of public folders were built for a specific thing, and then everything kind of blew up around them. And then we didn't even support them online for so long because of how they're stored. But now they're there. You can create them. If you don't want to create change, you can have those managed in the cloud. Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things I wanted to show is from an Office perspective. We talked a lot about, and you heard it in the keynote, click to run, and what Office from the cloud really means, and what does it actually look like. And really, Office, there's two ways to deploy. You can allow your end users to have the capability to deploy it across their devices. In Office 365 Pro Plus, you get 5 licenses across Macs or PCs. And then you have all of the different kind of mobile capabilities. But PCs and Macs, it's very easy to move through the process. Or you can control, and this is what a lot of our larger organizations do, they control it by actually downloading the bits to local network storage and then controlling exactly how that gets deployed out to their end users. And that sometimes is a crazy thought when you think, okay, Office 365 is the cloud, so how can I deploy it from my on-premises network shares? It's because it's still bits. You still have Office. It's simply a new way of delivering Office. So this link, and I uploaded this deck, it shows you all the different ways you can configure and run through an Office implementation from an IT perspective to control when it updates. We talk about monthly updates. Hey, you're going to get monthly updates streaming. Some of our customers say, well, maybe I want them every 3 months. You can actually download and control exactly how those updates hit. If there's some sort of imaging you have to run through to get to a gold image, and you have to do that every 3 to 6 months, you can choose the time in which you do the imaging, and you can test it in your own way. So I'm actually going to show that. I'm actually going to show a couple things now as we go through. Hey, I made it to my demo slide. So we're going to walk through a couple of these scenarios. Hopefully you can all see well, and I will try to use my Zoom for you. Oh, I timed out a little bit, so 1 second. So basically I have an environment of a bunch of servers and a bunch of domain controllers and ADFS servers that I can walk through these scenarios with. So if you look at this, I'm basically in a bunch of RDP sessions working on servers, and I'm going to show you how it looks to actually do some of the things I've talked about. So the first thing I wanted to show was in my client 2, which is just, I'm logged into Office 365 Admin Center. I've only set up a few users. They're in the cloud, and I'll highlight in here. From a single sign-on, it says set up because I've never done it. From an Active Directory synchronization, it says set up. And this is just me adding a couple of users in manually. Very easy to do. My pilot can start with this. If I wanted to actually add in more users, I can do that. Whoops, right there. And so I have the opportunity, just like I talked about, to add users, whether it's from bulk, whether it's from me just walking through the steps, but I can do that from a CSV file right here. And it literally consumes them up, tells me if there are any errors. I can take it from any kind of import or export from what I'm doing now. Very easy to do. So from a user's perspective, when you think of deploying, you just build them out in the cloud. Obviously, as you move to more production, you'll have to start thinking about how you would do that with your Active Directory. But a pilot's really easy to set up with a bunch of users. So now I'm going to show you a system that is actually utilizing directory sync. So I have single sign-on running. I can manage it. I'm actually activated from a synchronization perspective. I have these users who were built in the cloud, but I can now synchronize users from my Active Directory. So really easily, I can see directly from here, I am in the mode where I'm activated and ready to do DirSync. So what does that actually look like? Well, I have a DirSync server. And a lot of people when we talk about DirSync and password sync and real technical diagrams and stuff, it's sometimes shocking because it's just a wizard and you just need to know a few things. And so we're going to walk through my implementation of, I have my Active Directory, I have my domain controller, I have my DirSync appliance, and it just takes the first time to do this. I have my tenant created, ready to consume my directory sync of information, and I can literally start that, hit next, put in my username for my corp. So those are my, actually, no, that is my Office 365. And we always like to use Contoso. So that's my Office 365 creds. It's going to check those and make sure that I am the right person to be doing this, and I have to be the global admin who's doing this. Give it a second as we go. And the next thing it's going to ask me is my on-prem Active Directory. And I need to be the administrator from that perspective of my on-prem, because what this is going to do is take a snapshot of AD, push it up to the cloud, and be done. And then I have activated, or I have DirSync users who I can assign licenses to and activate. So it's just taking a second as we go here. Uh-oh. I typed in the wrong corp administrator. I may have to look. My apologies. Oh, it's administrator. And when you think of how simple this is, it knows I have an Exchange 2010 SP3 server or above in my environment because it checked that. And if I wanted to do hybrid, I literally select the hybrid deployment, and it starts putting in the information for that. And here is the magic password sync. Do I want to use password sync? Yes. It's built into all of the DirSync process. I can simply enable or disable it directly from here. And that's the magic of all of that identity stuff that I just talked about happening directly from the server. The very first time, it does take a little bit of time because it's capturing the entire Active Directory, pushing it up into Windows Azure AD, hashing all the passwords, sending the hash of a hash from a password perspective. And it says it's configuring done, and it will be done in a little bit. And we'll be able to actually see those users who got implemented directly in the admin. So when you think of deploying, even if you're just deploying Project Pro, even if you're just deploying Office, you need to do this. This is the first step in the process because we are going to check the licenses against all your users, and they need to be in there. And it says synchronize. And this now literally will run, and it works every 3 hours, and updates happen, and you never have to think about it again. If your infrastructure completely exploded, you could load this on another machine, do the same thing. It does not matter. So it is a very simple appliance that just runs now forever. And you can always look in the services and shut it down, but it just simply runs. It is literally set and forget. So from the perspective of there, we might have to wait a minute for it to really show up in the admin center. But let's see. Yeah, we'll have to give it a second as it goes. The other thing I wanted to show really quickly is I talked about the differences of implementing Office Click to Run. And where I am here is I'm an end user of Office 365. I actually go to my Office 365 settings, and I can see all the different software that I can load. So anyone, if you allow them to, can simply move to here, take a look at it, and say, yep, I want to actually implement 32-bit install. Here's some of the apps that come with Office 365. All of this is part of E3. So E3 brings you all the mobile, all the link apps. It brings you Office. And when you look at Office and says, hey, what do you want to install? Word, Excel, PowerPoint, the entire kit. And what you'll notice is on this machine, I have Outlook 2010. I have Office 2010 fully loaded. But that doesn't matter, because as long as I'm on Windows 7 and above, I can have side-by-side versions of Office with using Click to Run. So when you think about rolling out to a new business unit a pilot, you don't have to completely re-image. You don't have to uninstall the old Office. You can put the new Office on, and allow the users to start using the new capabilities immediately and always have a fallback if they need to. So I should have probably hit install while I said all that, but I'm going to hit install anyway. I'm going to click run. And again, I'm an administrator of my machine. That's why this is going to work. But this is the experience of Click to Run. Has anyone here ever installed Office from a DVD? It takes 45 minutes, maybe. And then when it's done, you have to wait for it to download another 700 meg of updates. So this is now at 50, 60, it's getting going. And you're going to see that even over wireless or whatever network you're running, and we have demos where we're sitting on trains in Tokyo and it all happens. But Office is now installing Click to Run. And this is the install, how Office is now being delivered. It's a full-fledged offline application, but it's happening directly in Click to Run. And I just hit next. And again, you can always script this so no one has to really do it. It says, hey, we're wrapping things up. Don't just stay online while we finish the work. And what you're going to see is on my start screen, I have my older Office applications. The new Office will just start to show up. And it literally takes minutes. And so as that goes and over some wireless going on here, it literally will take a couple minutes and I'll have Office running side by side. So when you think of deployment from an Office 365 perspective, this is how it works with Project Pro. This is how it works with Office 365 Pro Plus. You can literally start this directly from the cloud and then move forward across your applications. One of the other things I wanted to actually show, and I think they'll talk about this a bit in another session, but when I go to my admin center and I'm just logged in as the admin, maybe the person who owns the subscription or working with my business unit, I can always go and add, and you see all of the services here. That's everything that's possible. I can always go immediately to the add Project Pro for Office 365 trial, try it now, 5 licenses for 1 month, done. I now have the ability to license users with Project Pro. So that is across the board. When you see, I showed all the boxes of different services and different capabilities, the commerce platform, it really wraps it all in, and I would be able to now assign a user. Oh, hey, look, all the users from Active Directory, done. They're synced in the cloud. So all of those users came in. They soft matched against the people I had that matched, and all my users are now cloud users. I can now assign licenses to those users. So if I look at Allison, who wasn't there in the past, but now she is, I can assign her E3, and I can assign her Project Pro. That means she is now going to have all the capabilities that I want. Yeah, she's being migrated right now. Perfect. So that user now can use the Project Pro trial with E3 purchase subscription. Done. Mailbox created. I can now use a mailbox batch or stage migration or PST import to move that person's mail to the cloud. So from a deployment perspective, it can mean a lot of different things. Software, it can mean the service, it can mean licensing, but directory sync just synced the person. I gave them the license that you saw me sign up for in just 2 seconds, and now that person is fully able to start accessing all these services. Question in the back. Yep. To do Click to Run, it's admin. To do this one here, to do the second one there, you'd control it. So whether you're doing System Center, whether you're doing software pushes, whether you're doing it as just a simple command when they log in, you would be able to control that and control the deployment. From an end user perspective, they do have to have admin rights as Click to Run will be installing on the machine. Let's see if some of the Click to Run magic. Hey, look at there. 1 second. So the same machine that just had the old Office, I now have my new Office. And now it's streaming all the features I needed just in a couple minutes. And you can see that it's not even quite done yet. It's just saying, hey, we're still doing a few things, stay online. But what you'll notice is all of these are able to be opened. So I'll open Word. All the features I need to start using Word right now is ready to go. And so I have Word, the capabilities, the new pieces. I'm signed in. And I can go to the old Word, and when I search over here, you'll actually see that when I search for Word, I have Word 2010 and 2013, and I now have them side by side, running at the same exact time. From a user perspective, they can start to adopt and use the applications they want. If there's something you're afraid of doing from an Excel perspective or macros or add-ins, and you need to go through your app compatibility, great, you can do that. Utilizing the old software, they can continue to do that. But you see here, Word is running, it installed in minutes, and it's now managed from the cloud. And I now have Word, Office, everything I need on one of my devices. I could go do this on a Mac, I could go do this on another Windows PC, and I can do this, as Alistair showed earlier, on my iPad, on my iPhone, on my Android device, and it's all now connecting to that profile. Any questions from that side? So we talked about Exchange a bit. We talked about identity, hit Office. Any other pieces you'd want to see or think about? SkyDrive Pro, how easy is that? I mean, that really comes down to I'm logged in, I hit SkyDrive, and it's ready to go. And SkyDrive Pro gives me the opportunity to then have synchronization of my files, to work through all of my documents. When you see that I have this shared with everyone or stored information, and I'm sorry, I don't have the prettiest, I'm on my admin stuff, so it's not all set up like the Keynote with pretty pictures and everything. But it's very easy to then synchronize. When you think of deploy, if I was just deploying SkyDrive Pro to allow my users to share without using some of the consumer ways of doing things, they could literally get their synced, get their assigned license, log in with their onmicrosoft.com just like I am now, and start synchronizing their files immediately. And you saw this in the keynote. It takes no setup to do this. It just literally takes you sorting out the identity, moving them through the scenario. The end user now just simply can use SkyDrive Pro and work through it. Question? Yep. Yes. Yep. It is across the board. It is the underlying pieces of the service, which are commerce, identity, and moving forward from there. Yep. 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 And if you have a Office 365 tenant already, you can add Project Pro to it. You can add Project Online. If you don't, you kind of go through that path, but it's the same infrastructure. Yep. Yeah, we see that quite a bit. And what we see with, I mean, everyone's on older technology. Even if they're on 2013, it's older than Office 365. And it's just the nature of how it's going now. So what we see is, like, from a SharePoint perspective, some of the things, you know, people ask, well, is there hybrid? Are you synchronizing to the cloud? It's like, no. You have your on-premises implementation. You can have an online piece where you send users to their SkyDrive Pro online. You send users to a team site, you know, and I'll just take a step back. It used to be that I would have to call IT and say I want a new team site. And they'd say, well, it costs us this much to do it. What is your business justification? How is it going to be? Because every team site needed some place to sit. They had to manage the hardware. They had to manage everything. What we're seeing is business units who don't want to call IT, or maybe did call IT and were told no, are trying to then say, you know what, maybe I'll just do SharePoint Online with this budget, because they didn't say no, and it's always being built. And so we then work with IT to bring it back in and say, hey, you can do this on premises, your heavy portal or BI that you're doing, but let's point your MySites, let's point your SkyDrive Pro to the cloud and allow those new team sites to start being created online. And you really handle that then with navigation. Yep. And you know, we saw that at Microsoft. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we had 300,000 team sites in our SharePoint on-premises implementation. And at some point, when I went to create a new team site, I had to log into Office 365. And it said, oh, you want to do a team site? This is now where you do team sites. And we then have had a couple years of their, you know, they basically put in some really great checks that say, oh, you haven't used this site for X amount of time, it's going away. Click this box if you want it online. And so that we had to really deal with that, as you think the proliferation of team sites at Microsoft is just insane. Yep. So instead of the big migrations, they notice, like, hey, if you're not using these sites, we're going to start deprecating them out, getting done. And anything from this point forward, we send you to the new portal. You choose where your team site sits, and it's on Office 365. You know, that started a few years ago, and now we've when I have to go to an old site, it drives me crazy, because then I have to like VPN or do something else or use direct access. Whereas everything new is on Office 365, and I just simply go in wherever I am. So hopefully this is helpful, and I think I only have a slide or two. Yeah, I just wanted to summarize. So hopefully this helped you understand from a deployment perspective, where is Microsoft investing? What is it that we see from, we have to deploy this for you in the cloud? And we do it at a scale in which, is very, we own the Exchange, we own the SharePoint. No one has built a bigger scenario than us. This is our engineering team's largest investments. Hopefully I've kind of gone down the road of pilots and take some of the technical pieces out, utilize the service as it's meant to be, start with some of the business-driven pilots, and maybe you have scenarios you want to really kind of dig deeper into. You can do that without on-premises infrastructure. Yes, it'll be a little bit of a different experience, but when you position this as a pilot or as something that you're going to grow from, we've seen a lot of success from that perspective. And then best practices and guidance is in place with Fast Track. I mean, Fast Track is really where we've tried to take the huge collection of millions of TechNet articles and put them in a step-by-step process to try to help drive the right results. And then identity scenarios grow in complexity as needed. Starting complex sometimes puts you in a different scenario, and it puts you in a different time frame. So we really are trying to help our customers understand that it doesn't have to start with that 18-month AD remediation. It can start with the service. That's why it's there. That's why we are investing so heavily. And then choice and control. Really, you have the choice and control. You can let users kind of go wild with Office Pro Plus on their devices, or you can lock that down, and you can control that, as the gentleman in the back, with they're not admins, so we're going to push it out as we need to. So that is the session. Love your questions. Come on over and talk. Or, more questions. Let's handle it. Yep. It doesn't. It has barely any load whatsoever. It just came down to, we said don't put it on your DC because we didn't want it on your DC. There is some new documentation out that says how it is supported now on a DC, but that's new. So for the last 7 years, we've said have it as a role off your DC. Now we're kind of saying, well, I think we can do this on the DC, but it usually is its own VM or its own spot. Tiny. I mean, it literally is a text. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Question? Yes, there is. Yeah. And we, to be quite honest, we have IMAP, which does well, but the way Google handles IMAP migrations. They switch ports a lot. They have a very random port scenario. So we do have partners who specialize in that. And I would highly suggest some of the, like Skykick, Migration Wiz. I'm not afraid to say them. They are the top of the breed. And they've taken our tools and built them into their a really great first best of breed migration business. And they handled the app, the Google Mail, Google Apps very well. Yeah. Skykick or Migration Wiz. Yeah, they're both just super strong. And there's others out there that you can do, but those are like kind of cloud to cloud guys that I have off the top of my head. Yep. You can pretty much do it with the kit you've got, and you could even do it without doing DirSync, but DirSync really sets up that staged migration well. There is a thing called cutover, and cutover is what we see from some of those depending on the size. And if you look at the, we talked about stage because that's really part of the pilot build. Cutover is you load the users in, you don't need DirSync, it cuts them over, moves their mailbox, and you're done. So it basically becomes the first step is get the users, get their creds or your admin creds, use the cutover, which is still part of the admin center, and it just moves them straight across. Yep. Yep. Yes. As soon as you do the DirSync with password sync and they become consumed by that, their password gets overwritten by their on-premises password. And so it becomes a communication of, you might have been piloting with this password, you're now on this password. And then they have the single sign-on. Yeah, so Outlook will literally prompt them once, and then they put in their new password, and Lync will prompt them once to put in their password. Yeah, even with ADFS, you still have to do it. Yeah. Yeah. Should be called shared password or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. In tools long ago used to use like PCNS and things that would capture the password as AD was changing it, and they were all third-party type of stuff. And now that it's built in, we're not sending that password out. It is literally hash of a hash, and there's no way it barely, in the cloud it only exists as that encrypted piece. But that's a good question, and it is always part of the kind of change management principle of, okay, the pilot was this, and you had this experience, and now this is how we're rolling you into the normal way of doing things. Yeah. Yeah. So, I didn't quite go through that, but I can. One of the things that, let me go back to, that's a good point. So, hey, Office is asking me for my username for the first time. So this is what it looks like, and you put it in once, and then it's done, and it activates you. So let me just close down a couple things, make sure I'm on the right. So one of the pieces in the steps is you see I own domains. Contoso.com, you have the Contoso110.com, sales. All of these are different domains that you might have as your SMTP address. You might just have them as your logins. You can have, I think it's unlimited amount of domains. But if you're using domains, it's always the first thing that you would do in the steps. And I kind of skipped it to get to the DirSync and to get to everything else we're doing. But you start with the cloud on Microsoft. You start with .onmicrosoft.com. Let's see if I can. You start with this one right here. And it would be your name, .onmicrosoft.com. That's what I said. It's a fully functioning address, and it's a fully functioning way of starting with the service. But no one wants that as their email. No one wants to have that exposed in any way. It's just the baseline of what you start with. So in Pilot, you can start with this. And you can use connected accounts so that you can use your real email. But when you do move to production, you do want to use that domain name, any one that you might have, of contoso.com. And so as you set that up, and this one says setup is in progress, you walk through a very simple scenario of saying specify and confirm domain ownership. All right, let's start step one. It's going to ask me who my provider is, and we actually try to give you instructions directly in line with who your provider is. Most of our customers probably don't run their own DNS. So this is saying, hey, your provider might be GoDaddy, it might be one-on-one internet, and we help you and show screenshots that say, go do this on GoDaddy. Because it is very simple, but we want to help everyone because it's a text record. And all we're doing, and we are not changing your MX record at this point. We're not changing anything within your environment. What we're doing is making sure that you own that domain so that you can then start synchronizing and use that. So you walk through those scenarios, confirm your ownership, done, verify now. It didn't find mine because I didn't do any of the steps I needed. But if you did that text record, it takes a few minutes, usually 15 to 40 minutes, depending on how it propagates. And then it will just immediately pick you up and allow you to verify that domain. So that was a great question. And once you verified that domain, and you'd need to do this with every single domain that your DirSync is going to push up, that's when it will soft match on everybody. No, this is the domain you own already for your business. It's not even sub. We just need a text file that you put on your current DNS that means you're the owner of that. We're only checking ownership. So your email right now, we're just making sure you're the owner of it so that you couldn't put in Microsoft.com and we wouldn't give it to you. So it's just checking that text or CNAME record. And then we know it's yours, and that can start the process from a DirSync side. So thanks for asking that. Any other questions? Hopefully this was helpful for the crew. Everyone feel good? Go do? All right, thank you. We will be around, and I think we both have booth duty coming up here. So any questions, come see us in the booth. Thanks again.